Okay, we ready to begin, everybody? Here we go. So this is the third and final class of Soulmates. Melo, can you close the door, please, a second? The third and final class of Soulmates. The first two, we'll do a quick recap for the benefit of everybody. The first part, we talked about Bashert. And I want to give you one quote that ultimately will make you appreciate and understand the entire class, right? Here's a quote. I don't know whose quote it is, but look at this. Love is a connection in which happiness of another is essential to your own. That's really, when we think about trying to find a Bashert, I remember last week someone asked a great question. Why is it difficult? Why is it challenging? I did not have a good answer, but I know in terms of the search, that's what you need to see. Is there somebody out there when you're dating, when you're becoming closer, when you're connecting with? It's a lot easier for me, unless you're wearing pajamas or you're immodest, to see your faces. I feel some level of interaction. Otherwise, I'm looking at a roll call. So just, if you don't mind, it's easier. There you go. And everybody looks wonderful. L'chaim, l'chaim. So that's Bashertness. When you're looking into Bashert, who you want to find is this someone who really, really envisioning that their happiness is essential to your own? Now, granted, that takes a few dates and sharing some more life occurrences together, but that's the idea. Since Adam and Eve were created, forever we're trying to become one again, right? We know Adam and Eve, as we said, were one. They were separated apart, and since that moment, 5,780 years ago, we're still, man and woman are trying to become one again. Now, sometimes that plays itself out in unhealthy ways in that quest to become one, and hopefully it becomes in a healthy ways, the ultimate way in terms of marriage. And then we explained that the realities, we talked about the two different parts of when people are engaged versus when they get married, and why we had that is because we want to establish first the reality of oneness, to recognize that there's something called the reality of oneness. Once we know that there's a reality of oneness, once we have a certain commitment to that oneness, that begins the expression of the oneness. And we compared this to our relationship with Hashem and all mitzvahs. First, we have to establish that we are connected and that we are in a relationship, in a partnership with God. Then we begin the potential expression of that oneness in every mitzvah that we have. To make a bracha on an apple, to make a bracha on a coffee, to love your fellow neighbors yourself. That's already expression of the oneness of our relationship of being God's partner. Part two in recap was, once we understand already the bashartness of it, now we have to come into the idea of what is the driving force of all marriages, or most marriages, I should say, or most relationships. I shouldn't say the driving force, but ultimately an integral part of it, an integral part of most of the relationships that we find today. You know, whether it's subliminal, subconscious sexuality, and whether it's a sexual revolution of the 60s, whether it's the ineptness of the sexual society that we're living today, the confusion of it, the mishandling of it, you know, the trivialization of it all. What does Judaism have to say about sexuality? And we spoke about other religions that usually one cannot be with the other. If you are a spiritual person, if you're a monk, if you're a priest, you're a minister, then you can't really indulge in what we would otherwise know as the material appreciation of life. But in Judaism, it's very different. In Judaism, sexuality is Judaism, spirituality, and sex actually pair well together. So that's the good news. Baruch Hashem. You know, like my father would say, someone asked him, say, Rabbi, because we're Hasidic Jews, we try not to we try not to touch any other woman other than the one we're married to. Some of you know this, that when someone extends a hand, we're not supposed to shake a woman's hand. We're not supposed to touch another woman. The only woman we're supposed to touch is the one we're married to. Now, sometimes this can be uncomfortable, and I certainly would not ever go, I do my best to make sure no one is ever embarrassed by this. So if someone sticks out a hand, if I think they're going to be embarrassed by that, I could avoid their embarrassment by my uncomfortable stringencies. But as a whole, that's our policy. Now, what is that idea? So one time, so it was an individual asked my father, said, Rabbi, I don't understand. She extended a hand, you won't shake my hand. How do you have so many kids? So he said, listen, we are blessed with 12 kids, but it didn't happen through email. In other words, Baruch Hashem, sexuality in the home of all rabbis, ideally, is supposed to be healthy. Now, once we got into we also spoke about King Solomon that wrote the whole book Shir Shirim, which seems to be like a love thing, which was confusing to the beginning, and ultimately was used as a metaphor between the relationship of God and the Jewish people. We spoke about the Holy Temple, where we had the Holy of Holies. Once a year, the high priest would go to the ark, and on top of the ark was the Keruvim, was a female, male cherubs that were embracing each other. So we see that, and that's where God communicated from. That was the very place where God communicated to the Jewish people, was from that one place. So we see intimacy, sexuality done in its proper, respected way is actually a very holy thing. As a matter of fact, we also said it's an obligation of the man in terms of the woman's rights to have sexual intimacy in the proper time. And once again, we have the parallel in our own relationship. As we know, the month of Elul is an acronym for Ani L'Dodi V'Dodi Li. I am to my beloved, and my beloved is to me. Once again, we see this relationship coming over and over again between a man and a woman, between man and God. We're not trying to hide it. It's very much part and parcel of our experience. And the more we can go ahead and be comfortable with that, the more actually we can advance ourselves in our personal relationships as well as our spiritual one. So this all leads us to tonight's final class. And tonight's class is really about the very, very great question. You know, first of all, let me just preface say that all our classes is all about relationships, as you know. And it's relationships in a way, ideally, I cater to the YGP community, but even if someone's married for 10 years, this class can apply for them as well. What is bashartness? What is the importance of sexuality? And in this class, the idea of mikvah. So even if you're not married yet, you think, why is the rabbi talking about mikvah and why is this relevant to me? It's a mindset. If you understand how Judaism approaches marital bliss, and in terms of a long-term game plan, then you can utilize those tools into your own search and your own life. So most people do not know what mikvah is. It's very, very misunderstood, integral part of Judaism, integral part of mitzvah, and certainly integral part of marriage. And ultimately, because of its modesty, and its uniqueness of its mitzvah, so there was not a lot of it publicly, which created for more, I would say, rumors and ambiguity about the whole mitzvah altogether. So you're left with a lot of, perhaps rumors about mikvah, but not really understanding what it's all about. So I'm going to try to help dispel some of the misconceptions about mikvah. But more important, my goal tonight is not about, dispelling the misconceptions, but rather the value, the positive importance of bringing mikvah into your life, into your marriage, and why it's so integral. So just to begin, there's a joke. I don't know if it's a joke, but it's funny, where they asked, a rabbi, he said, you mean to tell me that for 2 weeks a month, you don't have relationships with your wife, you don't touch your wife, you don't kiss your wife for 2 weeks out of every month? That's crazy. So the rabbi retorts and says, and how often are you intimate with your wife? So he'll say, well, we're both working and the kids are acting up, and here come the excuses. The reality is I don't want to take a bet, and I certainly don't want to do any demonstrations, but I think that an average healthy Hasidic life that takes upon mikvah as opposed to not, they have their fair share of intimate times together. We'll leave it at that. The statistics show that there's something what's called, I don't know if you've ever heard of this, called a sexless marriage. What qualifies as sexless marriage? 20% of all marriages have sex once a month. That's 10 to 12 times a year. That's called a sexless marriage. Now, I don't think that's very healthy. I think obviously it should be a lot more than that. But at the same time, that's the good news. Those are the 50% of the marriages that actually make it for more than 4 years. The average marriage in America lasts 4 years and ends up in divorce. That's on average. There's a lot more weird and not positive statistics about marriage, but I don't want to make anybody more comfortable. The fact of the matter is that it is alive, it is well, everybody wants it, and it's possible to happen, and I think that should be the focus. And the focus should be is how to make it work, how to find the right one and how to make it work. So Torah has a tried and proven method for thousands of years, and it's called mikvah. Now, we'll get into the specificness of the mikvah and where it comes from and what type of mitzvah it is. I want to talk about its qualities vis-a-vis its importance and its value in a relationship. What is the great challenge of a marriage? Is keeping the comfort and security of the elimination of loneliness, but still have the freshness and spontaneity and to have the same passion and desire. Let me break that down a little bit more. I think everybody would agree that one of the wonderful things about marriage is that all of a sudden you have a partner in life. You found your bashert. Whether it's to go to the movies together, not to go to the movies together, whether she goes with her girlfriend, you're watching football with your guys, the fact that you know that you have your partner in life will eliminate the loneliness forever. So it's a pretty amazing concept. I put it all on your to-do list. So that's a wonderful thing. The challenge becomes in most marriages and in most relationships is how do you still then have this spontaneity of the passion that you had before you got married? And most people can't figure that one out. Because when you're not married, everything is free game and everything is new and exciting. And so that level of spontaneity and passion is there. The loneliness is there as well, sadly, but at least you also have passion and spontaneity. The best of both worlds is to have both. To have the elimination of loneliness, a partner in life, a stable friend, as I think we called it love versus friendship, a stable friend, and at the same time have a spontaneous, exciting, and perhaps even daring, relationship, both emotional and physical, in the marriage. To have it 10 years in, 20 years in, 30 years in, forever. It's possible. How is it possible? I'm going to give it to you in one-word answer, and then we'll talk a little bit more about it. Can you guess where I'm going with this, everybody? The one-word answer is Mikvah. The mitzvah of Mikvah. So let's talk about what that really means. As I said, there's a lot of misconceptions about it, and so we're going to try to dispel some as well. The question that, in terms of most of the academics talk about the frustration of sexual intimacy and the longevity of that within a marriage is, do we say that refraining from sex causes more problems, or it's the problems that you have in your life that causes the lack of sexual activity? As I already mentioned, 15 to 20% of marriages are deemed as sexless marriages, or it's under once a month. So we have to go ahead and combat that. Like I said, because of the discreetness out of modesty has led to many misconceptions. So the first thing we want to talk about is the idea of what mikvah is also known as family purity, taharat hamishpacha. That's how it's known, as the mitzvah, taharat hamishpacha. The question is taharat hamishpacha, for lack of a better definition, means that the purity of the family, the sanctity of the family. It's not the sanctity of the woman. Yes, she's the one that ultimately goes to the mikvah, but it's not about the woman. It's about the entire structure of the family, the husband-wife unit, as well as the entire family as a whole. So it's the first thing to understand. The second thing is that when we talks about translation from Hebrew to English, it's a very, very poor translation. Purity versus impurity shouldn't be confused with clean and dirty. It's not at all what it means. As a matter of fact, we know that the woman, way before she goes to the mikvah, she can take a shower. It has nothing to do with someone not being clean or hygienic. That's part of the misconceptions that we should get rid of right away. We have a problem with translation. So what do we mean when we say, tameh or tahor? So a little bit of background is necessary. Back in the day, by the first and second temple, there was a concept if somebody touched the ark type of impurity as if someone passed away, someone was dead. And if you touch that, you had to, remove yourself from the community for 7 days and go to the mikvah, and then you were allowed to go ahead into the temple to give offerings. Why? Because a place like the temple where God resided in a more overt way should not be confused with something as death, which is the opposite of life. The temple represented life, impurity represented something that touched death. Those two don't go together. Let me break that further down so you have a deeper appreciation of this, which you can be used practically in every aspect of your Jewish life and every life. What is the problem of not doing a mitzvah? What is the trap, perhaps, of not doing the mitzvah? And why should you concern yourself about not doing a mitzvah? In the Hasidic thought, the reason why we do a mitzvah and the reason why we should avoid violating a mitzvah is not because you're going to get pie in the sky. It's not so that after 120 years, they're going to give you a nice, courtside seat. That may or may not be a byproduct of your good behavior. But what is the real reason that we do a mitzvah? because God, who created the world, asked us to do a mitzvah. God is the giver of life. Let me stop for a second. I forgot to wish everybody much health and happiness in this still weird time that we're living in. It's nice to escape it and let it out of our mind, but when we talk about health, it comes right back to mind. So God has given us all enough health to figure out how to use your Zoom. I'm still working on it. And enough health to go ahead and listen and learn Torah here on a Thursday night. So God is the giver of life. Every time we do a mitzvah, we attach ourselves. Mitzvah means tzafsa, to connect. Every time we do a mitzvah, we attach ourselves to that life force. Anytime we do the opposite of a mitzvah, we detach ourselves from that life force, even if it's just a little bit. So think of the 613 mitzvahs like a rope with 613 strands. And every time you do a mitzvah, you strengthen one of those strands. And every time, God forbid, you do an aveira, you loosen one of those strands or you sever one of those strands. So when we think about mitzvah as a life and attachment and not mitzvah as, so to speak, the opposite of life and attachment, let's take that into the conversation of purity and impurity. So when we talk about purity and impurity, we mean more in terms of life versus the opposite of life. So in a very technical way, we can say the follows. By the way, the only aspect, interestingly enough, that still holds of any biblical command with issues of purity and impurity, this is 2,000 years after both the first and second temples were destroyed, is in this mitzvah of Taharat HaMishpacha. We don't have it anymore because the temple is not around. This is the one remaining place where, once again, I take you back to the part 1 of class, 2 of class, and now 3 is in the space of intimacy. Once again, we find ourselves talking about the most important things and the most important aspects in Judaism. So when a woman goes through a menstrual cycle, and after that she waits 7 days, she goes to the mikvah and she reunites with her husband. For all the technical details about menstrual cycle, you can talk to Shifra for your Kala classes. It's not really my specialty, my specificness, so I'm just going to keep it really short for the class. But the short of it is like this. The idea of a menstrual cycle means that it didn't have the opportunity to utilize the egg, which would be fertilized within the uterus, and ultimately become a fetus and become pregnant and become a child. So menstrual cycle means that opportunity was not there. And going to the mikvah after that fact is the opportunity for that to be there all over again. So going to mikvah and coming out of the mikvah represents the opportunity of rebirth, the opportunity for life again. So till you go to the mikvah, that chance is not there because the woman is menstruating. After the mikvah, that chance is again. So the most reflective opportunity that we have to emulate godliness, as I said in class number 1 and 2, is to procreate. And once again, the way to do that on the highest optimal level is the opportunity is right after the woman goes to the mikvah. So it's again, intimacy in Judaism does take a lot of space, does deserve a lot of attention because it is integral and spiritual part of obviously our world and our society, and to move on. And Torah doesn't run away from that. We're not scared of that at all. We're not scared of any of these things. We embrace it and we talk about it and we learn more about it and we try to educate ourselves through it as much as possible. And in this class, as we already started, there are different aspects of it. I don't know if we'll get to all of it. There's the technical aspect, the halachic aspect. Some I shared with you already, and some of the more spiritual ones we'll get into. So now that we've established that it is not about... Yeah. Another important aspect about mikvah I want you to know is, as many of you know, I've done officiated a lot of weddings. 90% of the weddings that I officiate, at least 90%, are not Orthodox. People who are not Orthodox at the time. Most of them were never Orthodox. Some of them may have become since I married them. I don't know. I'm not very good at follow-up. But why am I telling you this? Because one of my prerequisites that I officiate any wedding is that the woman learns with Shifra or a Rebbetzin that she's comfortable with. You know, the laws of mikvah. She has to go to mikvah before she gets married. There has to be a proper ketuvah. And of course, we have to check out the lineage. So those are 3 major requirements that I have in terms of officiating a wedding. And many of the people, while they're not kosher, they're not shomer Shabbat, they're not observing of Torah mitzvot, but they're moved by this mitzvah of mikvah, so much so that they continue to do it even after their wedding. And they may not have a kosher kitchen, but mikvah they take on. And you'll soon see why, because this mitzvah is a very powerful mitzvah, especially when we talk about the relationship between a husband and wife, man and woman. Okay. So now we understand that mikvah, now that we've established that it's not about being clean, but rather it's a spiritual state of readiness and receptiveness for the divine flow and energy, blessings, and potential for more life. That's really what mikvah represents in its one-sided form. So even though the temple is not here, as I mentioned, this is the one place that we still find this level of intimacy. Now, mikvah, just so you know, is what's called a chok. There are three different types of mitzvot in the Torah. Chokim, mishpatim, and edut. Three different types of mitzvot. One mitzvah is, or mishpatim is a mitzvah that's what we would know by ourselves. It's like judgment. Someone kills, someone steals. These things we know you're not supposed to do. But there's still a mitzvah even though we'd understand it by themselves. Edus is a type of mitzvah that the Torah tells us God rested on the seventh day, and therefore we should have Shabbat. Now, without the Torah telling us, we may not know this mitzvah, but since the Torah tells us, we go ahead and appreciate it and we get it. Then there's a chok. Chok is a mitzvah which doesn't have any meaning. Which doesn't have any understanding. Obviously, there's meaning, and we can do our best to understand it, but it's called a chok. It's a mitzvah that we do. Like, for example, you probably didn't know this. You know kosher is a chok. That's right, kosher. And yes, there's a lot of reason that pork is bad for you and it's very high in fat. Those are all true. It's okay to still try to understand why we have kosher. And the more we understand, there's many books on kosher. But ultimately, it's a chok. Now, we're going to give a lot of reasons. I already gave many for mikvah, but it's important to understand that it's a chok. And why is that important? And what's the value of a chok? You would think that to understand rationally with our own brain anything is better than just doing it robotic. Yes, from one side, that's true. But there is something that's beyond that. And I'll give you an example. And I give no examples of my own personal life because Shiva could be jumping on the Zoom call any time and I don't want to get in trouble. But I'll give you an idea that could have happened. We'll plagiarize a story. And this is the idea of chok. So if you're lucky enough, Baruch Hashem, I bless you all, take this moment in the spirit of the Rashbi, we celebrated Lag BaOmer, I channel that energy to all of you to find your bashert this year. If you could do it during COVID-19, if you could figure that out, God bless you, let me know. I actually had two different couples that told me that they got engaged. They met beforehand, but they got engaged during COVID-19. So you should have all the blessings and to find your bashert right away and let me know. When you are blessed to be in a relationship, and this is more to the guys out there, and the woman is blessed to be pregnant, and she wakes up 3 o'clock in the morning, or she's not sleeping 3 o'clock in the morning because she's uncomfortable, because she's not feeling well. And she tells you, I need you to find a 24-hour open store. It's harder to do now, but may be able to do it. I need you to find a 24-hour, and I need a bag of pickles. You think the guy's going to try to be rational and have a rational explanation? That's 4 o'clock in the morning, you're not even hungry, you're not even tired, and you hate pickles. Now's not the time to be rational. It's a chok. She needs something. She asked you for something. You're her partner. You're running for the keys. You're running in the car. You're going to go ahead and shake anybody down for as many pickles as you can and bring back the pickles. Maybe not the best example, but I think you got what I'm trying to say here in terms of a chok. You know, when she says, I'm bleeding from my finger, would you get me a Band-Aid? You don't need to think about why she needs a Band-Aid. But when she says, I want a bucket of ice cream at 1 o'clock in the morning, and you know, she doesn't even like that flavor. So there is a very certain power in the mitzvah, in mikvah, more than other types of mitzvot, because it's beyond your own rationale. So at this point, I want to we'll do a little share here, and let's see if I can find it. We're going to go right to text number 7. Hang on a second. Rega. If I could find it. No, not it. Let's see, Soulmates. 1 second. You think I get better at this on here we go. Okay. No. Share. Tov. Okay. All right. But it's not moving here. Oh, here we go. Seven. Okay. The laws of family purity are divine ordinance. It is a difficult commandment, a discipline that makes demands on our time, our psyche, and our emotions. It is a force at odds with the flesh, a way of life that the average person would not likely choose or devise. It calls for willful suspension of self-determination, the subservience of our most intimate desires to the bidding of a higher authority. And therein lies the mitzvah's potency. The knowledge that it is sourced in something larger than the self, that it is not based on the emotions or subjective decisions of one or the other, allows Tarat HaMishpacha to work for the mutual benefit of woman and husband. Ironically, this unfathomable mitzvah reveals its blessings to us more than almost any other in daily palpable ways. Its rewards are commensurate with the challenges and its observance. So that's an important thing to appreciate. When we talk about rewards and benefits, I don't want to use a popular term, friends with benefits, but when we talk about rewards and benefits with mikvah, we could say this. Everybody knows the concept of abstinence makes the heart grow fonder. But there's another idea as well. From Proverbs, there's something called forbidden waters taste sweeter. Mayan gnuvim taku. So remember that the premise of the class, at least in navigation, was to talk about these two different competing ideas. One is the elimination of loneliness, or the consistency of having friendship, companionship, which ultimately is certainly a big driver in the benefits of marriage. But we seem to lose the spontaneity and the excitement, in that process. So how do we get both? When we have mikvah, there's something called the reward and the benefit of when you can't be intimate with your partner for 2 weeks, you're forced to take on new conversations and new dialogue that would otherwise perhaps not be there. Not because you're incapable of having a conversation, if you're able to, physically be close to your partner. But, to hug someone is getting 1,000 words already out. With one hug, you can express what you're feeling. And which is nice. That's the beauty of a hug. And thank God we should all be blessed to have that. But if you're only hugging and you're not using 1,000 words to discuss how you're feeling, that's a problem as well. So emotional intimacy is what's being created when you're not physically with someone, and emotional intimacy enhances the physical intimacy. So this is a tremendous, I may have mentioned this in the first class, Dr. Ruth Westheimer, a famous sexologist, she had told my father, even though she was an atheist, that the most brilliant thing that the rabbis did was come up with the idea of mikvah and taras mishpacha. Because couples are forced to go ahead and talk to each other in the way that friends can without any of that sexual tension. Or maybe the tension is there, but it's not happening, so you're forced to upgrade your game. And the flip side is, as we say in Proverbs, Mayan gnuvim taku. The fact that she's forbidden right now makes her only more desirable. So what happens? So that when she does come from the mikvah, all of a sudden you have the benefit of both. The desire and the passion and the spontaneity, so to speak, because it's not this a rote day in, day out, when you're both feeling on it, or you're going to calendar this. No, you have a whole different experience. So now you can see already where we start to answer this question of how seemingly many marriages outside of this experience is failing on both fronts. They're failing with the spontaneity of it. They're failing with the best friendship of it. Everything's just... So all of a sudden you create a space, a separation space, that forces everybody to go ahead and appreciate each other in a much more profound way. I'm going to go share again. We're going to go to text 10 and 11. Rega. Okay. 10 and 11 is a place that's familiar to me because this is, again, what we talk about under the chuppah. This is blessing number 6 and 7. So we say, Samach to Samach Re'im Ha'ahuvim. Re'im means friends, Ha'ahuvim is lovers. We asked the question at the beginning of the class, how can we maintain this idea of both friendship and lovers? To have both the consistency of a friend, the elimination of loneliness in our life, at the same time the excitement of lovers. Grant abundant joy to these loving friends as you bestow gladness upon your created beings in the Garden of Eden of old. Bless you, God, who gladdens the groom and bride. Okay? In text number 11, we have like this. Blessed are you, Lord our God, King of the universe, who created happiness and joy, groom and bride, rejoicing in song, delight and cheer, love and harmony, peace and companionship. Soon, Lord our God, may there be heard in the cities of Judah and in the streets of Jerusalem the sound of gladness, the sound of joy, the sound of the groom and the sound of the bride, the sound of rejoicing from grooms at their weddings, and young people at their feasts of song. Blessed are you, God, who grants joy to the groom with their bride. So the figure, I believe, we're sharing right here is 3.4, right? So we have love and desire. If we just have love, so your grandmother can love you, but you want to have desire also. So it's a little bit different. We want to have these two fusions. So we see it breaks down both in the 6th blessing and the 7th blessing. Re'im Ha'ahuvim is lovers and friends. And over here we have 8 different categories it talked about. Love, harmony, peace, companion, rejoicing, glad song, pleasure, delight. 8 things, 4 and 4 divided on both sides of these 2 areas that we're trying to inculcate into our life, into the experience. Now I want to get into a whole different conversation. This is more of the technical part that I share with you of the value of Mikvah and how that plays into the love/spontaneous friendship that we can have moving forward. Again, like I said to many of the people, the young adults out there, it's not something that you should file away, that when you have kids or you're a year into marriage, what you should bring it to. Understanding the healthy relationship of a man and woman in marriage, well, I certainly believe will help you view and relate and connect and look for with proper eye spectrum in terms of your connection and your partnership. Let's continue to text 14, 15, and 16. This is going to talk about more the spiritual side, okay? So just because it's a chok, which means a mitzvah that we don't understand, doesn't mean that we shouldn't try to understand it. We shouldn't have a deeper explanation into it. So we gave some of the practical relationship ones, but now let's talk more on the spiritual element of it as well. So we have here from Torah Or, from the Alter Rebbe, and it goes like this. The sea is the embodiment of the hidden world. The consciousness of the hidden world is such, just so I can stop for a second, when we say the sea is the embodiment of the hidden world, we celebrated the splitting of the Red Sea a few weeks ago on Passover. Why was that the biggest deal? Because we know that God hides himself in the sea. He hides himself on the physical, on the world and the earth and the land. And the sea is ultimately the idea that it covers over everything. So you don't really see everything that exists on the physical world exists in the sea, and more so, but it's covered. By splitting the sea, we allow ourselves to experience and see and visualize God's greatness. On the physical land, he hides himself, and we have to work hard to dissect and decipher the godliness around us, especially now times, right? So we have to look for it. We have to expose it. We have to express it, as we said in class number 1, to express the godliness in every experience that we have. But in the sea, it's all one. It's one organism. Everything kind of flows together. That's representative of what's called Alma the Iskasia, the hidden world, which over there everything is exposed once you're in it. So the sea is the embodiment of the hidden world. The consciousness of the hidden world is such that one source is apparent. There's no sense of separateness. Land, by contrast, is the embodiment of the revealed world. The creatures of the revealed world experience a sense of false independence and individuality. This is deep Hasidic and Kabbalistic teachings appropriate for the time of the Sphira. But when we think about the physical world and how it operates, in order for us to have a sense of independence, that we have free choice, that we can do things that are good and do things that are the opposite of good, in order for that reality to take place, it means that God has to remove himself a little bit. He has to remove his potency. If God was overtly floating around us, then the game would be a fit. We see godliness, we're scared to go against it. But God hides himself in this world. And our job is, so to speak, is to hide and go seek, is to extract and to go find God wherever he's hiding. Sometimes he's hidden even in our own self. We have to expose God in ourselves, many times. And sometimes we see that side of us. When you go to Israel, and you're on a birthright trip, and you go to Jerusalem, and you go to the Kotel, and you go on a Friday night. Hopefully most of us had that experience. Why is it so uplifting? Because godliness is more overt there. He's less hidden there. The place is holier, the time is holier, the people, the mood. But once you move out there, I don't want to say Tel Aviv or Eilat, I don't want to, because I like them both, but let's go with Las Vegas and Los Angeles and Venice Beach. Over there, sometimes you have to work a little harder to find the godliness. So that's the idea that God is representative of something hidden in this physical world. But in the waters, the Yam, the Abasha, even how he created the world, the water was first, then he created. Over there, it seems to be one organism. Everything flows. That's what it means when it says that the source is more apparent. So same thing we'd say in terms of what Mikvah represents. Mikvah represents is going back to that space of godlike perfection, where he's not hiding anymore. It's that experience that the woman gets when she goes into Mikvah. And she feels this sense of life and unison with Hashem in a way that it's almost impossible to replicate any other way. And because she has that profound experience, she's now prepared and able to go ahead in potential, even if, let's say she passed, even in potential to create another life and to have that special moment with her husband. Let's go to text 15. When a person immerses in the mikvah, he's subjugating himself totally to God's creative power. We can see this from the etymology of the word mayim, which is a Hebrew word for water. According to a number of authorities, it shares the same root as the word ma, meaning what. When a person immerses in water, he's nullifying his ego and asking, what am I? Again, Hasidic thought teaches the following. The more we're recognizing of our I, of our ego, the more difficult it is to make room for God. Why does it say in Ethics of the Fathers, whoever says I'm nothing but Torah, he doesn't even have Torah. Because if you're making so much noise about who you are and what your space is all about, there's no room. There's no room for God to give you a download of a spiritual infusion, because you're too full of yourself. But once someone's humble and someone's bittul, no matter, they can be a great person, but they themselves are humble. They have a certain humility. Once you have that humility, then you are able to go ahead and receive all the blessings. So this is what we're talking about in terms of mayim, has idea of ma, which means what, which is reflective of the highest sense of selflessness. As long as you can still ask why or what, you're putting yourself in a position and recognizing that there's more you still need to know. That takes a little bit of ego, to take away the ego. When you're in a class and you want to raise your hand and say, teacher, I don't know something, it's hard to do. You have to remove your ego to do that, right? But the one who's not embarrassed will end up knowing, will end up appreciating. Why? Because he doesn't have the ego that gets in the way. So I want to do a final one, 16, and then we'll open up for discussion and we'll round things up. The mikvah personifies both the womb and the grave, the portals to life and afterlife. It's on a side note, last week, I had done it, is it last week or this week? I can't remember. No, it was this week. Oh my God, that was terrible. It was this week. I did a funeral today's Thursday, I did a funeral on Sunday. and a bris Zoom on Tuesday. And I talk about the life cycles. So in both cases, at least in terms of, conception, we have mikvah, and we also have mikvah when it comes to tara. When someone passes away, there's a tara, there's a mikvah process before they're put into shrouds and they're buried. And as we explained earlier in the class, ideally before a woman conceives, at some point she's going to the mikvah before then. So the mikvah personifies both the womb and the grave, the portals to life and afterlife. In both, the person is stripped of all power and prowess. In both, there is a mode of total reliance, complete abdication of control. Immersion in the mikvah can be understood as a symbolic act of self-abnegation, the conscious suspension of the self as an autonomous force. In so doing, the immersing Jew signals a desire to achieve oneness with the source of all life, to return to a primeval unity with God. Immersion indicates the abandonment of one form of existence to embrace one infinitely higher. In keeping with this theme, immersion in the mikvah is described not only in terms of purification, revitalization, and rejuvenation, but also, and perhaps primarily, as rebirth. And because, as we explained throughout the series here, the rebirth of one person, spouse, is also by definition the rebirth of the other. It's not that she has a rebirth and he doesn't. She represents the rebirth and brings that into the family structure, into the family experience and unit. And that really covers everybody. So when we talk about from bashartness to sexuality to how to sustain this idea of both a long-term friendship as well as a spontaneity and excitement and the daring passion that we can still have, for those of you who've been married or will or have any experience with marriages, if you are abstaining from being with your wife for 2 weeks, you can only imagine the excitement of what it's like to be for the 2 weeks that you can be together. Every month becomes like your wedding night, and afterwards can become like your honeymoon. Now, how many people can really, really get to say that in year 11, 12, 20 of their marriage? So somehow the rabbis knew something that today's society still can't figure out, is how to create this experience. On both terms, you're going to talk to each other as friends. You're going to elevate your relationship. You're going to up your emotional game between each other, which only enhances the experience of your physical game, so to speak, with each other. And it's a very, very unique and special mitzvah dedicated, and when the vision is in terms of two people creating life together. That's the premise of it. In other words, even if it doesn't play out that way for one reason or another, that you can't have a child every month, but in potential, that's what it's reflective of. That's what it represents. That the highest experience can lead to that is a huge thing. And even if it doesn't lead to that moment, at least you have that opportunity to replicate that and be in that moment and be in that experience. To be godlike. To elevate ourselves to be greater than ourselves. To be ourselves is not a big deal. You were born who you are. That's not what makes you great. What makes you great is when you can figure out how to be greater than yourself. That's what marriage is supposed to be. That's what marriage is supposed to offer us. Is becoming not because you've acquired an asset, because you acquired a car or a house, that there's something about that other person that you like. That's objective. But actually elevating together to a third and higher place. If someone is pretty, or someone is tall, or someone has good taste, or someone has good flair, or good style, or a nice bank account, those are all things that you like. And if you don't like them anymore, or if they don't have them anymore, where's the relationship? But as we said, if you're connected to the other person because of who they are, not what they have, then all the other stuff is extra. And who are they? They are you. The happiness of the other person is essential to your own happiness. So it's not that you think about your own happiness. You think about the other person. You think about how to get that pickle at 4 o'clock in the morning so your partner is happy. And when they smile, you're happy. Because you're one and the same. Because it's your right hand and your left hand. It's one organism. So mikvah is the process of keeping that special quality exciting and fresh and spontaneous and endearing, all in one. And so in recapping Soulmates, I would encourage everybody to recognize the same theme. It plays itself out in different aspects of Judaism that marriage provides, whether it's mikvah, whether it's wedding, chuppah, all these different elements. But in its core, it's really the same. And what's that? It's reestablishing your other partner, your other half, and building on that and recognizing that and giving space for that and tremendous humility for that. If you have humility, I really, really believe, especially in our times, and I'm not looking at anyone specifically over here, and a lot of you shut off your cameras. I'm talking to myself because this never gets old, and no one ever masters it unless you're Mamish Mayshe Rabbeinu. Humility is the key. I know it sounds like mushy and not exciting, but it really is the valuable part. If you're able to humble yourself for the greater cause of your marriage, your partner, that's where the rewards pay off. And I guess there's obviously a huge humility for a woman to go to mikvah. Some are better at it than others. When I say better, some take to it easier than others. I can understand, both perspectives. But either way, it's all about the same idea. It's all about we're all working for a greater experience, for a greater unit. And when we see ourselves in our search, in terms of looking for the greater unit that we're trying to accomplish, like I said in one of our classes, think of it in terms of we're trying to create an island that's bigger than ourselves and better than ourselves. I am me and she is she, but together we're creating this third unit, let's call it the family, the island that we call marriage. So many people are so scared they're going to lose their identity because, they're becoming, a unit with one other person. You've worked so hard to create your own image and your own friendships and your own style. Also, there's going to be a woman that's going to tell you at 4 o'clock in the morning, get me a pickle. Then what have you become? You're like a Grubhub pickle guy at 4 o'clock in the morning. Who are you now? But when you realize ultimately that you won't lose yourself, you'll gain a much greater part of yourself. Any healthy marriage will allow you to still have your friends and still you have, there's no Monday Night Football anymore, but football night for the guys. Any healthy marriage, you don't have to go shopping with her and her friends if you don't want to. She doesn't have to go play football and go watch your things. You still maintain aspects of yourself. Those never get lost if you don't want them to get lost. As long as they're healthy and they're not hurtful, why not? You can have them. That's not what you should be concerned about. But creating space for a much greater payout, a payout that looks like a partner in life that you'll both, and with class number 3, that you'll still maintain spontaneity and desire and passion. You're not going to lose that. The way, sadly, so many others in the secular society have lost that, even in marriage. So Torah has some great wisdom, some great teachings, and as always, I'll conclude with the blessing, and then I'll take off the mute, and we'll open it up for questions. I wish everybody, you should find your soulmate. You should express your own soul to a high level. And when the moment of humility is called upon you, you're able to tap into that as well, because that's going to be key. And if I could be of help in any which way, shape, or form, please let me know.